Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, as always, joined by Joe Rossinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach on the Crusade Channel. Always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Please be sure to enter the chat room if you dare. crusadechannel.com/chat. We would emphasize to everyone, Crusade Channel, it's a cause. It's not a radio station. So we urge everyone to become premium members, and you get the whole lineup: Mike Church, Rick Barrett, Kennedy Hall, Joe and Joe, and everybody else on this station. And what is going on the Crusade Channel is very, very important for a lot of people to hear. So we would encourage you to support Crusade Channel by becoming a premium member. Also, wherever you see Joe and I on social media, primarily on Frontline TV. That's where we're trying to build up our primary audience on social media, which is on YouTube, the Frontline TV. You'll see our two ugly mugs there, and you could like, subscribe, share, do all them fun stuff, and certainly wherever you see us. Please help us out any way you can. If you want to send a few dollars, you can. And the Patreon, patreon.com/the Frontline with Joe and Joe. But just by sharing and getting the word out there, that really helps us out. And we really appreciate it. Okay, so enough with the shameless plugs. So Joe Rossinello, this is a really good conversation to have because, people forget there is a social compendium of the Catholic Church. It goes back to Pope Leo XIII in Rerum Novarum, reiterated 50 years later in Quadragesimo Anno by Pope Pius XI. And Pope John Paul II had a little something to say about socialism and communism, too, in Centesimus Annus. And we want to talk about that because there's a few things going on out there. Well, a lot of things going on out there that really impact us as Catholics. You have a lot of anti-Catholic bigotry going on right now. Unfortunately, it's being perpetrated by other Catholics to a large degree. So we have that to deal with. We have to, Joe, I got to tell you, Joe, people got to stop looking for utopia. They have to stop looking for heaven on earth. And I think it's a conversation that we need to have. There is no heaven on earth. All right. If the sooner people get that through their head, the sooner people, Joe, will stop buying into these inferior religions like socialism and communism. You're never going to have a perfect world. As soon as we get that through our heads, that would be real progress if we would get that through our collective heads. Okay. And Regis Martin had a really good article too in Crisis Magazine, want to talk about on prayer. Joe and I are always talking about prayer and the need for it, but prayer and politics, not either or proposition. And we like the conversation. So that's, what we're going to talk about tonight. And we think that you're really going to enjoy it on the Crusade Channel. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Rossinello to see where he wants to go first.
As Joe mentioned, we're going to begin the show with a statement from 1991. Do you pronounce that properly? How do you pronounce it?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Joe. You were going in and out for a second. Centesimus Annus.
There we go. I'm horrible. Forgive me. I can't get the Jersey out of me. I'm not.
Joe, I know that I get Quadragesimo Anno wrong. I've heard it pronounced.
No, I get tongue-tied. But this is a document that was on the 100th anniversary of Rerum Novarum, as Joe said. And from that, we're going to lead into Prayer and Politics by Regis Martin and Crisis Mag. I think it's a good tie-in. Basically, what John Paul II began his statement with, he said, "Democracy needs values to avoid being manipulated." This is a little excerpt from that statement. He said, "Possible, and on the basis of a correct concept of the human person, it requires that the necessary conditions be present for the advancement both of the individual through education and formation in true ideals, and on the subjectivity of society through the creation of structures of participation and shared responsibility." Now, this is important. He says, "Nowadays, there's a tendency to claim that agnosticism and skeptical relativism are the philosophies and the basic attitudes which democratic point of view, since they do not accept that truth is determined by the majority. For that, it is a subject to variation according to different political trends. It must be observed in this regard that if there is no reasons of power, which we're seeing today, and as history demonstrates, Joe Pasillo, democracy without values easily turns into open or thin skies totalitarianism. That is what is going on.
Well, don't we see that all around us, Joe? In other words, people say, like, oh well, though, like take for argument's sake, just using an example, okay? Take critical race theory. Oh, that's not really being taught in public schools. Now, I'm just using this as an example, okay? Okay, you say that it's not, but it clearly is. People get mad. You know that you're in the minority, and yet you still maintain these levers of power, and you're forcing people to have to deal with, let's say, for argument's sake, CRT, because you say that we have to do that. Now, again, why am I bringing that up? Because that's what we're living in when it comes to all of this. Okay, it seems to me that what we have is the majority of the American people that are sane, okay, and a minority of the American people that have a lot of power right now and are totalitarians, whether it's CRT, whether it's gender ideology, whether it's abortion, whether it's any of it. Okay, we're very simply being told what to do. Okay, and we have no recourse whatsoever. We have to continue to do it. And the more we try to fight back, the more we realize just how little power we have. That's the way it seems. It seems like what John Paul II is saying is absolutely correct. This is all giving way to a totalitarianism. I mean, I don't know any part of the country that's not really feeling that totalitarianism right now.
Well, I also think he's touching on the whole argument of absolute relativism, because he's basically saying if there are people that adhere to the truth, meaning there is an absolute truth, you're some kind of wacko. And that
Right.
kind of leads very well into what the other articles we're going to discuss. I mean, the relativists have an absolute, and they are the totalitarians. Basically, they make you adhere to their quote unquote truth, even though they say there is no truth and it's subjective. And I think we're seeing that. Ultimately, when a society isn't guided by God, it's guided by basically whoever has the strongest arm. And that's what's happening right now. You're seeing people enforce their will upon others. We're seeing it in many, many different situations, on the local level as well as on the federal level. And to be honest with you, it is a watered down version of totalitarianism. There's no question about it.
Right. Right. And the thing is, too, one thing that bothers me more than anything, Joe, is that we've said this before at the Frontline with Joe and Joe on the Crusade channel, is that first of a couple things. First of all, the answer to a moral relativist, or the question I would ask any moral relativist when they say there is no truth, I would ask them to say, is that absolutely true? Okay. And to which their brains fall out, because they know they recognize the logical incoherence, Joe Resinello, of their argument. Okay. It is not logically coherent to say there is no absolute truth and state it as an absolute truth. And that's what they do. That's number one. Number two, Joe, I'm tired of this idea that the default position of the United States of America is secularism. I don't buy it. I don't think it's a sound argument. I think that we should attack that argument as much as we can, because it's really a lie to say that the default position. See, what they want, Joe, is that they're very slick. The secularists, the atheists. What they say is this: unless you show me God, then the default position is secularism or atheism. Like they like it's like until you could prove the existence of God, which of course has been done by Aquinas and others, proofs for the existence of God. But the thing is, somehow, some way, you're nuts, as you said, you're crazy. You can't hold that. You can't even weigh in on political issues if your political position has as its source your religious worldview. And that's a lot. I'm calling BS on that, Joe. I'm calling
No,
BS on
you
that.
know, I mean, times change. It's funny. I watched today with two of my sons Quo Vadis,
Hmm.
the old movie. I mean, it's
Hmm.
from the 50s. I mean, that movie was at that time one of the biggest productions Hollywood ever put out. I mean, you had major stars. It's basically, the story of Christ. You
Right.
know, that would never be made today. That was 70 years ago. Times can change back. Now, why do I bring that
Sure.
up? Because ultimately, Joe, you're saying basically if you adhere to a religious belief, you're discounted. Well, guess what? The belief system currently isn't working. And this goes back to something we say time and time again. We talk about Benedict XVI on his radio address in 1969. Ultimately, people are going to see that what's happening isn't working. And why bring up that movie? 70 years ago, our country accepted that as a mainstream film that's considered one of the greatest films in Hollywood. It could change back
Right.
because ultimately what could happen is we're going to see fruit of their decisions, and it's bad. But people sadly are slow. It's like the story of the fig tree in the gospel. It takes time. It's going to take time. But as it moves forward, I actually believe don't give up hope because things change. Think about that. 70 years ago, a movie about Christ is the movie in Hollywood. Now it wouldn't
Right.
even be made. Why can't it go back again, Joe? It could. I think it could.
It could, but we have to be, we see, but this is where conservatives in general and religious conservatives, and yes, I mean particularly faithful Catholics in particular. Well, let me not lump all faithful Catholics. There's a lot of faithful Catholics. We consider ourselves to be faithfully Catholic. Okay, we're opening our mouths. The problem is a lot of people don't know how to go on offense. That's the problem. You're right. Things can change in this country, but there needs to be a reassertion of Christian principles. Now, let's talk about this for a minute, okay? Regis Martin talks about on prayer and politics. I like this because he must be watching the front line with Joe and Joe because he
Should
talks
be.
about the need. Well, he should be, but he talks about the need for prayer and then getting out into the public square, which we've said on the show a million times before. Okay, you get on your knees, you pray, you go to mass, and then you get out into the public square. We need to be courageous in our reassertion of the superiority of Christian values. Okay. See, remember something, Joe. You stumbled on something. Okay. Atheism, they don't have or they don't look at fruit because they don't care about fruit. If there's 60 million babies that have been killed since Roe versus Wade, they'll go like this. So what is it? See, we look at that as horrible, horrible, dark, bitter fruit of, let's say, our secularist society. Okay. They look at that and they say, They look at gay marriage and they say, so what? Two guys get married. What do you care? Let people just be happy. They don't see the fruit because they don't care about the fruit. Their attitude is it's all chaos anyway. The only thing I will say is this: the only order, because the majority of these people are leftists, okay, the only order they will accept is the order that they choose. And then you want to know what? Then the majority, the values of the majority of people aren't going to matter anymore because then they'll discard them too. So they're a little they think that they're slick when it comes to that. So I cut you off, Joe, but go
No,
ahead.
but what I was going to say, it's not necessarily the abortion or the gay marriage that I'm pointing to as clearly that is a bad decision, clearly. Um, but it's the suicide. It's the addiction to painkillers. It's the family breakdown. You see, they're not connecting. When I say bad fruit, that's the bad fruit. Their ideas don't work. Their idea of family, the modern family, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not going to work. It's going to continue to produce bad fruit. You have dysfunctional children that are in the world. They're miserable. They're in. Why is special education growing at an enormous rate? Children are wounded and they're becoming wounded adults. That's the bad fruit. They just don't connect their ideas to it. But in time, it's like the Democratic Party. Frankly, I mean, as long as the Democrat abortion or I mean, or vote for those for me. But as long as the Democratic Party embraces these ideas, to be honest with you, they're going to continue to produce bad fruit. And frankly, Joe, they're turning people off now. I already see it in my own neighborhood. It's the greatest poll is your own neighborhood. People who are quote unquote Democrats, they're getting turned off. Eventually, against the wall, eventually you stop. And this is what I'm talking about. People have to wake up to that reality. Sadly, people don't think a lot of time. They just look at their own little life. I always say, like, people's ideas go to their front door, from the kitchen to the front door. They don't think broader. But ultimately, though, many of these ideas are starting to get to their front door. Dude, gasoline is off the charts. Inflation is off the charts. Your food bill every week has grown a lot. What else are we talking about? We're talking about our kids in schools, public schools. People pay a tremendous amount of taxes. This is affecting normal people. Sadly, there are people who drink the Kool-Aid are going to vote for frigging Joe Biden anyway. But
Right.
that's not winning you the prize. I'll be honest with you, Joe. I mean, they're 1 year in, and frankly, they've turned off. All the independents are gone. And frankly, a lot of Democrats are disenchanted. Their own party is disenchanted. And that's just 1 year. That's going to continue.
No, Joe, listen, I agree 1,000%. But the one thing is, and look, a lot of people out there, Joe, including, let's face it, we've lost a lot since we started to actually, we still talk about individual stories on this show. That's what we do at the Frontline with Joe and Joe, and a lot of it is the same stuff. Listen, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, when you talk about parents in front of school boards, okay, that's been going on for quite some time. Parents getting pissed off at school boards and going down. And now the particular one with the guy whose daughter was raped, that was more of a unique situation because that blows up their narrative. But we're talking along these lines. And Joe, when we talk along these lines, when we talk about if you want to straighten out politics in America, the culture of the United States, and all of it, if you don't bring God back, Joe, from the beginning, we lost a lot of people that used to follow us. When we used to talk about individual stories, because that's all seen people. Now, I'm not criticizing those people, but what I am saying is this, because we've stumbled upon what we knew already, but then we decided this was the way we're going to go, is that you could talk about these things all day long. All right. But if you're not bringing God into it, then you're going nowhere. You're spinning your wheels. You are the gerbil on the gerbil wheel, okay, that's constantly spinning and going nowhere, okay? And that's kind of like what Regis Martin is talking about in Crisis Magazine. And people need to, Joe, get it through their heads. You're not straightening any of this out without God. You could talk about gay marriage all day long. You could go about the atrocity of abortion all day long. Until people get into their heads, okay, that the Almighty, okay, God Almighty needs to be invited back into our culture and our politics. We're just that gerbil on that wheel. And that's why we have to keep speaking it loudly, more loudly than we have been, and influence others to do the same thing. Or else, you know what you're going to get, Joe? People are going to say, oh, the Republicans are going to take the House in 2022, and it's going to be a tsunami, a red tsunami. And they're going to do the same freaking thing they did when they took the House in 2010. Okay. They're going to do the same freaking thing when they took the House in 2016. They're going to do the same thing. All right. Unless they turn around and get their heads on straight. And the only way you can get your head on straight is if you get God back into our politics and into our culture.
Well, you how like this. You see, that's the best leader. It's like, I have a daughter. I would never want my daughter, I say this to my wife all the time, that marries, well, first of all, I'd want her to marry someone who's Catholic. That's a given. But in terms of, like, if she said, I'm marrying someone who doesn't believe in God, bad move. Bad move. Because it's the same thing with any leader. Bad move. Prayer should guide the politics. It guides the decisions. It guides everything. And I love what he mentions in this. He mentions a quote from Ignatius Loyola. He said, pray as though everything depends upon God. Work as though everything depends upon you. In other words, pray unceasingly that God unleashes his grace in order that hearts are softened, that the evil designs of men be turned aside by those not too proud to speak.
Actually, Joe, Joe, you got caught off there for a second. I want to make sure people heard that. In other words, pray unceasingly that God unleashes grace in order that hearts may be softened, that the evil designs of men be turned aside by those. Here's the important part that I want to reiterate: not too proud to spend time on their knees. Joe, I don't care how many times over a person calls themselves a Christian, a moral person, whatever the case might be. If you don't get on your knees and you don't pray to God, okay, as Regis Martin points out, why should he intervene? Why
Well,
should he
God
intervene?
will always
We don't ask
intervene
him,
because
why should he intervene?
but God loves people. I mean, God loves everybody. God intervenes even when we don't try to help ourselves. I mean, I could think of times in my own life, God intervenes because he loves us, just like a father will intervene with his children.
Mhm.
It's more about you. Prayer changes you. You see, that's where our country is not being guided in that light. If it's not prayer, it's ego that drives you, and that drives you over the cliff. It also teaches you to love one another, and love is a choice. It teaches you to forgive. God, country anymore, because we don't have that guide. God. That's why relationships don't work when God isn't at the center, particularly marriages, because it's those choices. I can think of my own life. My life has been guided by that. I would, in my Catholic faith, it was the best decision of my entire life was to be a practicing Catholic. But prayer changes you first and foremost, and it's through from that. I mean, Joe, I'll be honest with you. The average Catholic doesn't even go to church. And going to church on Sunday is the bare minimum.
Right.
It's the bare minimum. What's your prayer life like? What is your prayer life like? That's another thing. Are you communicating with God? You're going to change others.
No, Joe, and Joe. Unfortunately, we have a little bit of a bad connection, so you were breaking up a little bit. But hey, listen, the devil's not going to stop us. We're going to keep going through it. But I think that's the important thing. Regis Martin makes a good point when he says, when we make the sign of the cross. I mean, this is what struck me about this article. That's why I wanted to talk about it. Is like when we make the sign of the cross, we set in motion a train of grace whose efficacy may be felt in any time or any place. Now, I love that. It's true. That's why I love it. Okay. In other words, that every prayer, everything we pray for, okay. In other words, we send it up, and then God's gonna do the best thing with it. Okay. But like you said about Ignatius of Loyola, okay, pray as though, what is it? As though your life
Pray
depends
as though
on it.
everything depended upon God. Work as though everything depended upon you. You got to do your part.
But doesn't that seem to be the key, Joe? In other words, the part that we're missing in this country is that, in other words, you don't have enough people that want to, that everybody wants it. You have some, Joe, that seem to go into camps here. You get some people that think, and God bless them. You get some people that think, I think wrongly, that that's all you need to do is pray. And I think others that think that we could figure this out through our own reason and intelligence. We could figure out our problems and work our way through them, rather than doing what Ignatius says. In other words, God first, then get out there. Because I think both camps are wrong, or both camps are in error. I don't want to say wrong, because you should pray and you should use your reason and intelligence, but you have to use them together in a complementary way if you're really going to fight this political, social, and cultural battle that we're in. To me, if you don't do that, Joe, you and me are on the radio now, doing what we're doing now for about 3 years. I don't think we would have lasted 3 days without prayer. Right? And I mean that sincerely. Okay, we just wouldn't. We have to be able to realize that what we need is to constantly be on our knees, to do the things that are required of us, yes, by the church, but to ask God for his help, and then get out there and fight. You know who does that beautifully, Joe Rossinello? Father Fidelis. Father Fidelis does that beautifully. Okay, he is a great example of Christian
People may
witness.
not
Okay, what's that, Joe?
tell people who he is. People may not know who he is.
Father Fidelis with the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal. He gets mocked. He gets yelled at. He gets cigarette smoke blown in his face. He runs the procession. Now it's twice. It's first Saturdays of the month down in front of Planned Parenthood in Manhattan, and then I think the second Saturday is in Brooklyn. Okay, he is the perfect example of what Ignatius of Loyola is talking about. Okay, he prays. He's a priest, but he's constantly praying. Okay, and then he leads a rosary rally in front of Planned Parenthood, and they save babies. And they save moms, Joe. I mean, they save moms and they save babies. And that's what they do. See, he does both. He asks God for his assistance. And then what does he do? Leaves the friary, goes downtown and other places, gets arrested. He's been arrested several times. He witnesses the right way, but he'll be the first one to tell you that if he didn't, you could be triple pro-life. If you ain't praying, your efforts aren't going to do a damn thing.
Well,
Not
not
a
only
damn
that, I mean, think about this. If you're praying, you'll vote properly, Joe.
thing.
I
Yeah,
mean,
that's
because
true too.
prayer changes your heart. You see, that's what we're lacking too. I mean, if we're like operating on all our cylinders as a Catholic people, what do I mean by that? Going to confession regularly, praying the rosary, as Our Lady asked us in Fatima. This is not my idea. It was her. I pray the rosary daily. She said that. Why don't we do it? She's the mother of, okay? I mean, come on. And go to church once a week. These are basic things. They don't take a lot of time. If you're doing those things, you will.
No, Joe, you're absolutely right. And
We're
these,
not
like
even
you said,
talking about big things here, like going, like running for office, or like starting a nonprofit, or like
or getting
raising.
or getting arrested in the lobby of a Planned Parenthood.
None of that. I'm talking
Right.
basic things, basic, but we don't do that. You see, this is what, like, we're not a prayerful people. Our own people don't even read Eucharist. People. I mean, this is why we're in the state we don't see properly. Mother Teresa used to say that. People say, "What's your secret?" She used to say, "I pray." It's literally that simple. I say this all the time. I'm going to say it again. Confession once a month. Go to church with your family on Sunday, i.e., you're in a state of grace because you're going to confession, and pray the rosary every day. It takes 20 minutes. If you do that, you will be guided.
No, Joe, you're absolutely right.
And you'll fall and you'll get back up and you'll right thing.
Yeah, no, Joe. Listen. What you're saying makes all the sense in the world, and obviously these are the things we need to do. I think a lot of times too, people may be praying, people may be doing the prayer part. And this will segue into the other article that I saw by Casey Chalk, again in Crisis Magazine, talking about anti-Catholic bigotry. I think a lot of people are fearful, Joe. Now, again, I'm not judging anybody. Okay, I'm just not. Okay, there's a lot to fear when you could get your job taken away, when you could get arrested for going down to a school board for chastising the superintendent who knew about your daughter getting raped by a boy who was pretending to be a girl. There's a lot of things to be fearful of, but I think this virulent, aggressive anti-Catholic bigotry, which in America there's always been anti-Catholic bigotry. I think it's going to a new level. And on top of that, it's being perpetrated a lot of times by other Catholics. What do you think about that?
I mean, yes, but again, I'll point back to prayer. One of the fruits of the Holy Spirit is courage. Courage. I mean, trust that God will take care of you. You talk about the losing, you could lose your job. Okay, but God will provide. You see, that's part of getting close to him. Prayer doesn't necessarily change circumstances, Joe. It changes you. It changes you, how you look at things, how sometimes you accept certain realities that you have no control over. Prayer changes you. And no one needs to be changed more than the American people. The beating of the drum. That's why we do the rosary rallies on the first Saturday. That's why we talk about towards knowing that thing will fall into place again. We're all over the place, Joe. We are all over the place as a people, even the quote unquote successful people. To be honest with you, they're all over the place. You just look at social media. Look at social media as almost like an observation of society. See what people care about. They care about a lot of things that are utterly and absolutely superficial, that in the end mean nothing. Zero. Nothing. And ultimately, that's where we're at as a nation.
Joe, listen, all you have to do, okay, and this I am judging a little bit. I don't even mind. Well, not that I don't mind. Let me see how to put this. I expect evil people to do evil things, okay? And obviously we pray for those people, and we fight against evil however we could. But people who don't care or don't have an idea in their head, mostly I would say don't care, they're pathetic. And you see it when you're just walking down the street. Now, I pick up my phone out of my pocket. Don't get me wrong, okay? I call my wife or whatever the case might be. I on my job, I have to be in constant communication. But this chatting back and forth and having your phone like this as you're about to get hit by a cab on 6th Avenue in New York City, and that's just an example of what you're talking about. Those are people, Joe, that don't care about any of these things. They don't even care about it on the left. Well, they would probably care about it when it comes to abortion and things like that. But, oh, no, I'm in favor of abortion, or no, I'm in favor of gay marriage. They don't even know the arguments for it, and they just want to get back to this, Joe. They just want to get back to this. That's all they want to do. I mean, Jesus had something to say about those people because they're lukewarm. Okay, but the people who aren't lukewarm are those who I would say are anti-Catholic. Okay, and
well, there's always anti-Catholic sense. I mean, boy, the show a number of times, actually on Veritas as well as on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online. I mean, there's always been an anti-Catholic bigotry that went on in America. I mean, always. And there's always been an anti-Catholic bigotry across the globe. That's why Jesus was killed. I mean, he was killed because people didn't accept the truth. But still, in all, I mean, I just look at our own people who are baptized. The priority, not something that is at the top of the priority in their house. It simply isn't. And again, look at how they operate. People in your building that you live in, do they go to church? Do you see people just right where you live? Do you see people on Sunday getting in a car looking like they're going to church? On not Christmas, not Easter, on any given Sunday. Do you see that? In my neighborhood, I don't see it. I simply don't. No one goes to church. I don't even see sometimes on the big holidays people go to church. They don't see the need for it. But yet, many of these people, their lives are a wreck. They see the connection. They simply don't see the connection. Now, as far as anti-Catholic bigotry, clearly the devil is at work. I mean, the devil is at work. Dude, we're bad people because we're Catholic. It's almost like a bad word if you say to somebody that you're a practicing Catholic. You're immediately associated with almost like you're a bad person.
But what bothers me, Joe, more than anything else is the cowardice on the part of Catholics. In other words, let's say, because in this article that Casey Chalk wrote, he points out Kate Cohen, who wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post. She's making that typical slick argument. She thinks she's slick, okay? And to an unsuspecting mind, she's going to seem to make some sense. She makes no sense. She's saying, well, if she was talking about religious exemptions, blah, blah, blah. But she's like, well, if religious people can exempt themselves from, let's say, the laws that the secular society make, then why can't we exempt ourselves from religious laws? Then, of course, she goes on to say that anti-abortion legislation is religious legislation. No, it's not, Kate. No, it's not. Because the problem is that we've made, and I think successfully, okay, We've made the philosophical argument. We've made the scientific argument against abortion, okay? The moral argument against abortion, okay? We've made all the legal argument against at least Roe versus Wade. We've made all the arguments and you don't want to hear them, okay? So we have appealed to your rationality, okay? But then you accuse us of just making religious laws. Now, it is an abomination. Killing the innocent is the sin of against Abel. Okay, against Abel the just. Okay, the killing of an innocent, unjust killing of a human being. Okay, that blood cries out to heaven for vengeance. Okay, but you don't need to be religious to be against abortion. Casey Chalk points that out. Did you know, Joe? By the way, there's a new group that's gaining some prominence. Did you hear about this? Secular Progressives for Life. Have you heard of this?
No, I haven't. I have not heard that.
So they were down.
That shocks me for the simple reason that abortion is about sex. You see, they used to, before the science was there, they would say it's not a baby, it's a glob of cells. But now you can't say that because the science proves it to be. It's about sex. I mean, again, why do people want to have self-gratification outside of marriage? Why don't people value marriage? Why are people getting divorced? Why are people unfaithful? Because you don't have God in your marriage. They don't take marriage doesn't work without God. It simply doesn't work.
No, Joe, I agree with you on that, but I'm just saying, speaking specifically about this group, though, I was surprised to hear it myself. I'm not going to lie to you. Okay,
I'm shocked.
I agree with you, but remember something though. There are a number of people out there, but you'll never hear about them because the mainstream media doesn't want you to hear about them, who are either secular progressives, and I'm talking about famous people. And if there's famous people, okay, out there who, let's say, are atheists and are pro-life, who are secular progressives and are pro-life, you're never going to hear about them in the media. But if they're out there, there's a lot more people that think like they do. Okay, I always bring up Nat Hentoff, the old writer for the Village Voice. Okay, the man was a communist, Joe. He did not believe in God. He was an atheist communist. Yet he would go and protest with the Catholics, okay, against abortion. All right. And later in his career, the Village Voice had enough of him. Even though he agreed with them on 99 out of 100 things, they still fired him eventually. But my point is, there are many people who are against abortion who don't necessarily believe in God, okay? Because at the very least, what they see is a human being. At least they follow the science, rather than some of these people that say they follow the science, but they don't follow the science at all. And people like Kate Cohen seems to think that if we turn around and we make the scientific or philosophical argument against abortion, somehow that's a religious law that she can exempt herself from. But you see how slick they are. But that leads to what Casey Chalk is talking about. But that leads to a generally anti-Christian bigotry, but specifically an anti-Catholic bigotry.
You see, I think the anti-Catholic bigotry, like I said, if you're Catholic, or someone asks you, I'm a practicing Catholic, I don't think abortion is the first thing that jumps in their head. Now, I'm talking about at the average cocktail party. What jumps in their head is you are for traditional marriage. You see, a lot of Catholics are same-sex marriage. From a biblical perspective, isn't obvious. It's not even Catholic, it's Christian. It's also a belief that's adhered to in the Jewish faith. Our Jewish brothers and sisters are not for same-sex marriage.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a fact. Ask any Orthodox Jew anywhere in the world. They are not for that, nor are Muslims for that matter. But I think when you say to someone, if they you say, well, I am Catholic. I'm a practicing Catholic. The thing that jumps in their head immediately is you're not same-sex marriage, and that is basically ingrained in people through the media that you are a bigot.
Right.
That you are almost like a Nazi. That you're not allowing people to basically live their life the way they want to, and denying them their rights. And they're equating it on the same level as the civil rights movement.
Right.
And that is why I think it's growing. And I'm going to tell you this right now. Robert George put something out on social media recently, and to be honest with you, it didn't shock me in the least, that there are Republicans looking to form a rainbow coalition.
Oh, I'm
And
sure.
that is going to happen soon. I
I'm
always
sure.
say winners and losers, Joe. I'm going to tell you right now. Third trimester abortion, political loser. On no matter who you are, Republican, Democrat, atheist, whatever you want to call yourself, it's a loser.
Right.
Same-sex marriage. I'm not talking about doctrine. I'm not talking about Catholicism. I'm talking purely X and O's and politics. A win right now. That you are for traditional marriage right now, outside of a small group of quote unquote practicing Catholics, you are a pariah.
That's right.
In America today. A pariah.
That's
if
right.
you say that. And
That's right.
is where the anti-Catholic bigotry comes from. That is what it's not the contraception, because Catholics anyway.
Right.
How are you married for 50 years, not married at 26 and have 2 kids? How is that? It's not possible, scientifically speaking.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Look at people that you live with. I mean, again, the Bible is not paper. Look, Catholic, but that's what people think of. They immediately say that you are not for same-sex marriage. And in thinking that and in believing that, you are a monster.
Oh, you
And
certainly are.
And that's it, Joe.
Well, not
I'm
only,
telling you right now. And
not
that's
only,
going nowhere, by the way.
not only
that
are you
idea.
a monster, you, Joe and Joe's a monster. All those out there on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing, are all monsters. Rick Barrett's a monster. Kennedy Hall's a monster. You're all monsters. It's like, it reminds me of Bugs Bunny. Monsters are such interesting people. That's right. Monsters are interesting people. If we're monsters, we're much more interesting than you. But what bothers me, Joe, more than anything, too, is this notion that somehow secular progressives, okay, those who are, let's say, they're nuns. And what I mean by that is there's no religion. No, they don't infuse any religious ideas into the worldview. They're full of crap too when it comes to this notion that somehow, some way, that they're going to be unified on their side. First of all, those who are religious aren't unified, because as you abundantly point out on the show, okay, no, you have half of Roman Catholics, if not more, probably more than that, okay, and a whole bunch of evangelicals out there who make up a rather large part of the conservative movement in America. They're A-okay with the main source of all our problems, which is contraception. And if you talk to them about it, they wouldn't even want to talk to you about it. That's number one. But leave that aside for a second. I'm tired of this notion that somehow there's this homogenous, unified voice among secular progressives. Casey Chalk puts it a very good way, Joe. He says, even a purely secular regime would be an irreconcilable. Now, his language is very clear. Irreconcilable mess of utilitarianism, positivism, materialism, nihilism, Freudianism, Marxism, the esoteric world of secular academia. Philosophers are constantly accusing each other of irrationality. So as much as they point the finger at us and they say that we're irrational, they also point the finger at their fellow secularists and atheists, because they don't all agree with each other either. So I hate when they put this across that somehow they're unified in their thought. Okay, they're not. They're not. They got plenty of squabbles, and they're going to have plenty of squabbles and throat cutting on their end. All right, when they start to, I mean, we're seeing it right now, or we've been seeing it now over the last year or two with the women's track team up in Connecticut. The feminists like J.K. Rowling and others, okay, they're now the enemies of the transgender movement. They think there's a name for them now. I think they call them TERF or TERP. Or no, excuse me, TERF. It's transgender enemy radical, or transgender enemy radical feminist, or something like that. See how on that side, Joe, they all have common interests and they all hate God. Okay, but you see how they argue with each other. They're a mess too, Joe Resinello. But they don't ever want to admit that. They just want to make it seem like we're all unified on our side because we're all secularists, and we all agree that religion in the public square is bad. That's just not true.
Well, ultimately, the proof's in the pudding. And ultimately, that's what is going to bring people back, is your ideas stink. They're producing bad fruit. And it's going to continue. It comes right down to that, Joe. You can't get, Christ said this so wonderfully in the gospel. He said, you know, like I'm paraphrasing, you don't get good fruit from a bad tree. It's just not the way it works. And the ideas stink. They don't work. It's that simple. You see, people, though, like to get along and they go along. Frankly, to be honest with you, people are very weak, Joe. I hate to say it. They want to be accepted, sell them for money, party. And frankly, in doing it, they destroy themselves. They destroy themselves. And their ideas stink. And they're going to stink. And they're going to continue to stink. Ultimately, though, I do think, because things go in waves, society will correct itself. How that's going to happen, I don't know. But we're in a process of people doubling down and on hard ideas. Being an anti-Catholic, Joe, got news for you. It's only going to get worse. It's only going to get worse. And it has been bad. I mean, in Ireland, Northern Ireland, you couldn't get a job. You lived in ghettos. They called it the bog side. You lived in ghettos. I mean, this is going on right now in China, in all, I mean, all over the world. And we're in the Middle East, if you're a Christian. I mean, we don't even taste the slightest bit of it. But we are going to. And I'm telling you right now, it's over the same-sex marriage issue, because that's a political winner. And when the Republicans get, and they're going to give into it because it is a winner. Somebody is going to say, you got to go along to get along. And they've
already been giving into it. Joe, we see the handwriting on the wall. No, remember something. Conservatives, many American conservatives, Joe, they worship the idol, the false idol of freedom. And they have a warped, distorted notion of what freedom is. That's why they're all on board with contraception. I'm not beating them up. The Ted Cruzes of the world, who I agree with on probably most things, the Sean Hannitys of the world, who I probably agree with on most things, on fundamental things, I disagree with them. And I know damn well they're not going to have a problem. Sean Hannity has no problem whatsoever with gay marriage. Okay. Because to him, as long as you say you have faith, you're pro-life and you're for free markets, you're going straight to heaven when you die. If you're as long as you're an American, that makes you a good American. Ted Cruz is all in favor of contraception. You see it now. You see it now going on. There's no shocker going on here when it comes to the Rainbow Mafia. There's no shocker going on. They're all going to, just like you said, at the front line with Joe and Joe on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online. They're already doing it because to them it's a winner. It shows you where we're at, Joe, that issue, that position on that issue is a political winner. And I'm agreeing with you. I think you're exactly right.
Oh, here's the thing. If you think like that, and I mean, if you are a fairly intelligent person and you're a practical person and you see things through that lens, and a lot of people do, and that's what drives their decision, I got news for you. You're not going to heaven. Christ says that clearly. He says you can't have the world and have heaven. He says that. I'm paraphrasing. Mammon is his term. You see, being a Christian, being a Catholic is being the world, but not of the world. Those winning and losing decisions drive you. You're supposed to be Christian or Catholic in season and in out. You see, people go along because they want to succeed. You see, they still think that they're in God's favor and God will be fine with it. Why are people against or for contraception from a political perspective? It's a loser. If you say that it's contraception, I don't care who you are politically, you're done. If you said, I'm going to ban contraception, you won't even get 10% of the vote in America.
Right.
Why? Why? Because if you're open to life, that means you're not going to have a life. What do I mean by that? Having children, a number of them, means you can't spend your money the way you want to. That means your time isn't yours. And I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. I could be Catholic, I could be Jewish, I could be Muslim, I could be evangelical. I'm not doing it.
Right.
And that's at the root of it. And the story yourself what God says, and that political knows that they're not going to do it ever. That's ever. And that's the truth. That you don't even hear contraception conversations in Catholic churches.
No, you're not. You're not going to.
Ever.
No, you're exactly right, and it really is a shame because all those people who like I don't understand how. Let's just take Ted Cruz for a second, okay? I don't understand how a guy who's obviously a smart guy, he's obviously an intelligent guy, okay? I'm sure at some point he has heard at least of Humane Vitae, okay, which Pope Paul VI lays out the argument of the Catholic Church against contraception, okay, and the bad fruit that will result of it, okay. And for a guy like Ted Cruz to just flippantly, well, I'm not Catholic, so I don't have a problem with contraception, then you don't understand our problems, Ted. If you can't understand that it is a mortal sin, which means it separates you from the love of God, okay, that's what a mortal sin does, okay, or at the very least, it's a grave matter, all right, to just make it a little bit more charitable, okay. Then if you don't understand that that's what's causing our problems, then something tells me, Joe. Then I seem to, again, this is a very smart guy, but I hesitate to call him a brilliant guy. Either that or he's blind, or willfully blind, or woefully blind. If he can't see that our problems have as their origin the separation of the unitive and procreative aspects of the sexual act. That is what's been the biggest cause of our problems. It's caused the destruction of families, fatherlessness, pornography, all of it, abortion, all of it stems from contraception. All of it.
Again, is such a loser, Joe.
I know.
But this is like even talking about people listening to it now on Facebook, on Rumble, wherever they're listening, and they're like, these are secular who'll be like, oh, I like these guys. They talk common sense, blah, blah, blah. What? You're not
right.
for contraception? You're crazy.
Right.
And that is the truth. Because why? Again, well, that's dogma. But if you break it down and you tell people why from the perspective of it's a selfish act, and it takes basically, you're saying to someone when you contracept, I only love you to a point, and that selfishness bleeds into other aspects of your marriage, no question about that. And that's one of the things that kills marriage is selfishness. Even if you say that, it's the ramification of the decision. I do not contracept. I will have a number of children. And if I have a number of children, I can't drive a car. If I have a number of children, I can't afford my house because I pay $8,000 a month in a mortgage that I should never have gotten into to begin with.
Right.
And there it is. Whether it's right or wrong, whether they think about it or they don't, it's the Christ says clearly, the road is never to hell. And there's a price to pay while we're here. I'm not paying it. That's what we say, not with our voice, with our actions.
Right.
With our actions.
Well, it's the old saying goes, Joe. It's Christ without the cross. In other words, again, I'm not the greatest cross bearer that is, but I understand there are crosses in life. There are sacrifices that have to be made. Hey, listen, Archbishop Cordileone last week, he called on all faithful Catholics to offer a rosary and a fast, a sacrifice for Nancy Pelosi. I did it. I'm not a very good faster. I have to be honest. I know the need for it, and I try. I actually had a successful fast on last Friday and prayed the rosary for Nancy Pelosi. You say that to a lot of people. That's all right. We don't have to fast. Or, all right, that's all right. I'll pray for her here. Okay, that's it. I did the sign of the cross. To actually say that you're going to sacrifice something. And again, Joe, I'm not very good at it, so I'm not judging those that don't. But I see the need to do without. I've mentioned this on the show before. You have 5 kids, okay? I have a child now, a 12-year-old, and he's going to become our legal son, hopefully over the next couple of months. I told you before, you have 5 kids. You know exactly what it's like. He's 12 years old. I already know what it's like to have to say no to myself. Because if you say yes to a child, you have to say no to yourself on some level. You know what I mean? On some level.
I get
That
it.
in and of itself is a sacrifice. That is a bit of what I would say, well, that's a cross. When you have to raise your family, take care of your wife, do all these things. These are crosses that you have to bear. Like you said, we live in a society where they plan out to have 2.3 kids and 3.2 cars. They want to have more cars than kids. If you really want to break it down, they want to have more homes than kids. Okay. And I don't begrudge anybody their success. But if you don't see if you see joy in cars and homes and not in big families, then you have you're coming from a bad point of view. Joe, we're almost at the end on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online. Any final thoughts tonight?
Well, no, I mean, basically, a lot of this stuff, if you ask me, will be resolved with prayer. We talked about prayer and politics. The eyes have to be open to America. Changes do. First and foremost, look at things. How you look at yourself. How does that sound? Are we actually living in reality? Listen, God is reality, Joe. And so many people live in this rationalization of what life look like square in the face. And they live in a rationalization. That's where we're at. Maybe America will change if we begin to be a prayerful people. That's my final thought. And I'll be honest with you, it's basic stuff. We're not talking about hours. Go to confession once a month. Pray the rosary every day, 20 minutes, and go to church. Why don't we do that? I will not change. It's the message from the beginning. The devil. I will not serve. I'm not doing it. And until we change that, nothing changes. Zero. We will swim in the muck. And
well, Joe Resinello, we're gonna have to leave it there, brother. We apologize to everybody today about the connection here. It's a little bit choppy, but we want to thank you for sticking with us on the Crusade Channel, your home for the Mike Church Show, Crusade Channel News, the Barrett Brief, and the Kennedy Profession. From sun up to sundown, the Crusade Channel is the last live radio station standing.